Thanks for joining today on the webinar. I'll maybe go around the room. I'm Josh, obviously, with DemandFarm. The topic for today is creating customer-centric culture through account-based selling, as we're all aware. So I appreciate you guys all joining and taking the time to just kind of have a nice casual conversation, kind of talking through your experience, your views as it relates to these topics. But maybe if you guys could go around and just do a quick introduction of yourselves, I think that would be great for the audience, and then we can kind of go from there. Start with you, Steve, since you're in the top left corner there.
Sure. Yeah, Josh. So it's a pleasure to see everyone. And I'm Steve Silver. I'm a vice president, principal analyst with Forrester. My focus area is all things sales operations, and revenue operations. But I do spend an awful lot of time with our clients, helping them understand what account-based selling is, what are some best practices, and how to embed this construct or this concept of account-based selling into the organization so that they're really getting value from their investment.
Excellent. You sound like you're perfect for this topic then. I'm glad you're here. Carter, you go next, I guess. We'll go kind of clockwise here.
Sure. My name is Carter Cathey. I'm with aytm, Ask Your Target Market, and we are a global research and insights provider and platform and technology. My role is SVP of Global Sales, and I lead most of the sort of customer-facing outreach teams here at aytm. And like Steve, I think that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to think about how we organize our thoughts and our thinking and our approach around our customer, and to sort of get out of our own way and have it not be about what we do, but what our customers need and how they approach their problems in their marketplace. So it's a great topic, and happy to be here today.
Excellent. Thanks for joining. Sean, last but certainly not least.
Yeah, and I do second all the sentiment shared. I think it's a great topic, and excited to have the conversation here. So Sean Moran, I'm a partner in the ZS Associates office in Chicago. Spent 17 years focused on Salesforce effectiveness, B2B go-to-market capability building. A couple of hats I wear in particular, leading our key account management practice. So full business focus on the customer to be effective. I also lead our effectiveness and talent service lines with some of the newer thinking around how to embed AI and new technologies and making people more effective.
Excellent. That's impressive. So thanks, guys. I appreciate you guys going around introducing yourselves, and I appreciate you guys joining today. I think the whole idea of customer centricity as a culture is something that's very near and dear to my heart. I'm passionate about it. So I think it's a fun conversation. I think as you kind of look at it through account-based selling and how we can use account-based selling to drive that into a culture, I think is something that's very interesting. And hopefully we can share some of our insights and things that other people find interesting as well. So
I'll share some thoughts on that, and then
sure.
hopefully get some comments from the rest of the panel. So because I spend a lot of time thinking about this, right? We all talk about customer obsession and customer-centric culture, and I'm afraid that sometimes those are buzzwords that don't really permeate down through the organization. And so from my perspective, and when I work with our clients, it starts with a deep understanding of what your customers value, this sort of outside-in thinking, if you will. Why do they buy your products and services or your solutions? What value are they getting from it? The functional value, the strategic value, the experiential value, the economic value. How do they measure that value? And then how do you and your customers together talk about that value and make sure that it's being delivered and recognized? And once you really understand that, then the question becomes, well, how do we make sure that everyone in the organization understands that value and is working towards delivering it? Sure. So for me, the whole concept of customer obsessed or customer centric starts with that understanding of what your prospects and your customers value.
Yeah, I like the idea of customer obsessed. I think that's a great way to say it. It's a great way to think about it. I think customer centricity probably sounds a little bit more clinical, but I think that customer obsessed is a great way to kind of think about it. And a great way, I think it's a great way to measure how effective you are, if you truly are customer obsessed. I think that's kind of the pinnacle of the idea. So Carter, if you want to jump in and maybe add some.
No,
jump
no,
in.
I was just gonna say, I think Steve's right that it's there's a lot of buzzwords that people like to say that don't actually permeate the reality of their businesses, if you're being honest. I mean, I've known some companies that talk about how customer centric they are, but they have, you know, like 11 distinct siloed organizations within their company, and 8 of them probably couldn't name 5 customers.
Sure.
And it's a pretty difficult challenge to say we're a company that orients all around the customer, except for 40% of our company that doesn't even know who our customers are or what they buy. And you
Sure.
can tell that too. Walk around these companies and ask them what are the reason that your customers select you? What do you solve for them that other people don't? And most of the people in the company won't know the answer to that. So I think those are all things that are attributes of the inverse of this, or the opposite of it is not customer centric. One of the attributes I've seen that I think is a good sign of it is when you have all of your people sort of organized around your customer and have access to a centralized repository of that kind of information. So again, like if you have a strong CRM system that is where your success and your delivery and your research and all the different components that are necessary for your customer journey through your organization are all using a shared resource, that's a really good sign. When they all have their own sort of Google share drives of information that are specific to their particular thing, I tend to think of that as a bit of a warning sign that they're not quite as aligned around the customer as they might think.
So there's kind of a silo theme in there, isn't there? I think if you're a siloed organization, then it's maybe impossible, but definitely difficult to demonstrate that you're customer obsessed or you're customer centric, which I think is very true. And that's kind of an objective way to look at it too. And it's pretty objective to find out if an organization is siloed or not, just based on kind of the examples you gave there. And it really is kind of a nice indicator as to are they truly customer centric or not. I think that's great.
And I think tripling down on this notion, right, that, the lip service, humans can see through this. So I think it's an obvious principle that companies need to be organized around the customer, right? Nobody's going to argue with that. It's much harder to actually execute it.
Sure.
So I think the information gathering that Carter was getting at, organizing, okay, what does our customer say, think, and do, and how can we act on that is really important. But, what I see is this is so breaking down those silos, this can't be a sales, this can't be a marketing, this is everything. It's cross business. It's putting the customer at the center of strategy, process, tools, people, expectations, how we talk internally, how we talk externally, right? All those things have to be aligned. And often that means fundamentally redesigning the business, right? So this is companies, unless they were developed, and maybe even if they were developed in the last couple of years, weren't necessarily designed this way. They were designed to say, we've got this great offering and the market's going to love it and we're going to push it, right? So this is fundamentally thinking about processes and how we work together off of that customer record and information. That's a pretty dramatic shift for many people. And, so you have to align everything, the wrap around the tools and the process and the culture to drive that.
That's great. Let you go first as well. But yeah, go ahead. You were going to say something else there, Steve?
I was just going to say, I love what Sean just said about humans can see through, the false expectations. And if you think about our experiences and our behavior as consumers, we see the ads on TV or whatever about customer centricity and customer focused, and we value our customers. But then when we spend 45 minutes to an hour waiting to talk to a customer service agent,
Sure.
or can't return a product easily, it sort of blows that all out the window. And I think those experiences we have as consumers, we also bring into our business. And so, Sean, your point about humans being able to see through the false claims, I think is just spot on.
Yeah, and to Sean's point, everybody says it, right? Everybody claims to be customer centric or customer focused, but obviously not everybody is.
Yeah.
I'll give one example, right, of the org model shift to trying to be in this direction. In some industries and companies that are faster than others. So there's this customer success role, right, that software companies and technology companies have kind of figured out as a means of, why don't we actually have someone tasked with understanding the value our customers get out of this measure their role by it, right? They're putting their customer hat on. They're really thinking about how do they use their product? How can they better use their product? How can they get value? How can they measure value, right? Makes perfect sense, sort of, but sort of mind-blowing also in many industries. And so I see other industries moving towards this in varying degrees. In healthcare, you see liaisons, medical liaisons, you see patient hub, focused reps as well. So I think there's varying degrees of this journey, but having people who are innately thinking about customer centricity and the value our customers get is a very nice step in that direction.
I agree.
You mentioned alignment, Sean, and that's something I've been thinking about quite a bit lately. And I think it's a really critical part of this is that you have to have alignment between the interests of all of these different stakeholders. That if you have your customer's interest and your business's interest and your salesperson's interest and your marketing person's interest, and they're not aligned, then it can turn into kind of a tug of war, as opposed to that we're all sort of working in the same direction. Even things as like sales compensation plans. The sales compensation plans can be counterintuitive to what the mission of the company is trying to do. And that a lot of things like that, how do we measure success in different roles? Well, how do we define success? What do we incentivize and cheer for? Those can be things that are either really aligned towards the mission and the vision of what we're trying to do, or they can be a complete distraction from it. And that alignment concept that you brought up, I think, is really, really key.
Yeah, I completely agree, Carter.
It's amazing, just talking through this, how kind of simple it is, to be able to determine whether or not an organization is customer centric, just based on a couple of indicators that we've talked about here. And it seems like something that pretty easily an organization, a board of directors, whoever that might be that's kind of spearheading this, would be able to determine, are they truly building an organization around customer centricity, which is a great segue to the next question, which is my favorite question, by the way. As somebody who, as a practitioner, this is around kind of how imperative is it that the executive sponsorship is there to develop a truly customer-centric culture. And in my experience, it's actually impossible to do it without it. That might be a bit of an exaggeration, but I think launching these programs and really trying to embed a culture of customer centricity in an organization without the right type of kind of top-down leadership. I think, Carter, you spoke about walking around the business and asking everybody in the company, what it is that we do and what value we add to our customers. I think that's a great litmus test. And then I think understanding how much buy-in, is this kind of something that we're saying, or is it something that we actually mean? And I think going to the very top and understanding, is that being permeated through the organization, it is pivotal. But I kind of want to get some feedback from you guys. Have you seen it work without the right of executive sponsorship? Or do you guys agree, I guess, that it's imperative and it really doesn't work without it?
I'll start with the latter, right? It can't work without it, 100%, unequivocally. It can start without it. It can live as a flash in the pan. You might get some wins in there, but there's no way to sustain this without executive belief, executive sustained energy against it. The culture point, I totally agree with Carter. It has to permeate and start with the execs on down. So if I combine that with the point around humans will see through this, your team, every level of the org will see through this. If it's lip service, if it's not being acted on, if executives aren't showing up to key customer planning or interactions, for example, right? There's actions that have to follow the words, and the executives have to set the tone. And if this is a month or a quarter, flavor of the month or flavor of the quarter, then it's going to fall off the radar of the rest of the team. But if it permeates everything led by the executives, then it has a chance.
Yeah, I find myself in violent agreement with my colleagues here. In fact, I would actually change the word sponsorship to engagement, or maybe even commitment, right? Because I think, Sean, you're spot on. This cannot be a case of do as I say, not as I do. When it comes to something like an account-based selling program or an account planning motion, the executives have to be intimately engaged in whatever the planning process. They have to show up for the workshops. They have to participate in account reviews. They have to use the tools and technology. So they can't say, well, you missed, sales rep, go off and build your account plan in a tool, but then I want to see it in PowerPoint, or I want to see it in Excel, or even Word, right? So they've got to be an intimate part of this. And again, I think it's engagement and commitment, and that has to show through at every step of the way.
I like the idea of replacing the word sponsorship. Yeah, I think that's a great way to say it. I think that they have to, have that presence, the involvement, the engagement, not just, hey, this is something we're going to do. So
that's the key to having it be everybody, right? Otherwise, you could have pockets of it, right? Like, I've been in organizations where like sales and marketing were really well aligned, but other parts not so much. But to really get it across the board, you've got to have, in the same way that my team wouldn't be able to do it if I was opposed to it. I mean, I could thwart them from being able to do that. That other leaders in other areas can do the same, and it really usually takes that executive presence to say, this is a key priority for all of us. This is important to me. This is what we're going to do, whether they're daily involved in it or not. I've seen some that are more involved than others, but they've got to be at least supportive in theory, and going, I appreciate the fact that you guys are going off and doing it. It's not what I'm going to do every day, but I'm not going to get in your way. And it has to at least be that, I think, for it to be successful.
Yeah, that raises a great topic for me around even the word we use. So I think, Steve, awesome point on changing out something that inherently sounds more passive for active, right? It needs to be active, advocacy, all these other words. Engagement's a great change for sponsorship. And I think companies struggle even to get sponsorship, but it truly is that next level of activity that we need to strive for.
I see a lot of companies that don't have sponsorship, let alone engagement. And, I think they are almost two separate things. Sponsorship is, yes, we're going to invest in this and it's important to us. Just kind of saying it and doing it, kind of creating the budget space and things so you can have a proper customer success organization and, kind of account-based selling organization, et cetera. But then that level of involvement is like the next level. And I think that really is showing more. It's more than just a concept or something that you think is kind of cool. So I think that's great. I guess along those same lines, to kind of follow up on this kind of strategic organizational piece around account-based selling strategy, do you think that it's imperative to have a customer-centric organization in order to have a successful ABS strategy? I could kind of get my head around either way. You got to have one, or you got to have one to have the other. I think it's really hard to have just one of them. But I guess my question for you guys is, have you seen it work where it starts with one instead of the other? Or do you think it always has to start with kind of a customer-centric organizational DNA, and then you kind of launch this ABS mentality?
I'd say I'm with you, Josh. I think it can kind of go either way, but it's got to start somewhere. And I think often sales is the one who recognizes, hey, we better get more closely aligned with our key accounts, our large accounts, our most valuable customers. So we need to implement this idea of an account-based selling program, or account planning, or strategic account management. But it cannot stop there. I think, to Carter's point, it's got to go across the entire, certainly the customer-facing components of the organization, but even more broadly into the entire organization. So I think those two things are so intimately intertwined that you can't have a truly successful ABS program without customer centricity. And conversely, you can't really have without some form of an ABS program. So, they're hand in hand in my view.
I think that's right. Like, I do think that one thing sales can do, and this maybe me overestimating the power of a sales organization from my own lens, but I do think that sales has a unique opportunity to amplify the voice of the customer, and that we tend to be closer to the customer and more in tune with what their needs are. Now, whether we always interpret those correctly or not, that's its own question. But we have more visibility and more interaction with that allows us to understand that. and then how we choose to selectively amplify that client voice and that need within our organization can help sort of be something of a rallying cry towards pulling people towards the center and towards the customer. But I agree with Steve that's a bit of a poor proxy for true client-centric approach. But it's a way to sort of start if you don't quite have everything already in place.
Sure.
Yeah, I love the idea as the sales tip of the spear, right? The real pointed connection to the customer in this world of emerging technology and AI. That is the primary value and what organizations need to double down on, right? And really support, because it's easy to lose sight of what is that value, that identity of the sales rep in this world. But I think you need that. So with that ABS, I think is an initiative you can lean into. As we've been talking through this, to me, both certainly reinforce each other. So it's hard to think of not going after both. I think both are journeys, right? So they're not developed, at least successfully, overnight. Culture, probably even more so, right? So you can't wake up and say, all right, we're customer-centric culture, right? That's years in the making and has to start with defined plans and actions and so forth. So I think, ABS is something maybe more pointed, more focused. So if we're going to go do this while we continue to build our overall organizational culture and competency around being customer-centric, it's a never-ending journey in a sense.
Yeah, and I really believe that to throw customer success or customer experience into this as well, I think that customer success is really that voice of the customer back into the organization. So I guess in my view, you have to have a strong customer success organization and provide them with all the necessary tools and processes to be successful in order to bring that voice of the customer back in. Because if not, there really isn't a great way to measure how great we are. I think we can go around and talk to people in the organization and see how they feel about the customers. As Carter said, we can, see is there executive buy-in, is there executive presence. But I think that true voice of the customer tells us how well we're doing. So I guess I want to get kind of your view. In my view, that customer success piece is pivotal to it. And then also, do you guys think, I think we talk about sales being the spear. It's easy for sales because a lot of times sales compensation is tied to some variable of if your customers are happy or not, right? If they're happy and they're buying from you and they're coming back, your compensation is somehow tied to that. Have you guys seen it, organizations that are so embedded into this customer success culture that everybody's compensation organization is tied to some level of voice of the customer, feedback from the customer, from the person, at the shipping dock all the way to the CEO's office, where they've really threaded that into the compensation model in the organization? Because I think that's an interesting way to demonstrate how important it is to the organization. So I guess that customer success piece being the voice of the customer, and then there's that compensation. Have you guys seen that kind of happen in any of your experiences?
I've seen compensation be done wrong more frequently than I've seen it done right.
Sure.
And I think it's one of those things where it's like, I think the challenge that you have in taking it out to the whole organization is that there are different personas within a company that are motivated by different things and that are incentivized and feel valued by different things. And that to take a sales model that says, I'm going to put this much of your revenue at risk and have this financial reward as a model for other things, I think is inherently problematic. But it doesn't mean that there's not ways that everyone shouldn't have a clear definition of success, and that there is a reward and an incentive that is appropriate for what they do and how they do it and what's motivational to them. But I have known people that are just desperately terrified in having any of their sort of revenue at risk, and that having the stability of it is really, really important. And so I think you have to be really careful as you thread that needle around how do you use compensation to motivate the right behaviors and to incentivize those things, and not have these unintended consequences of actually like motivating the wrong behaviors or introducing a fear component that causes people to not approach things with a sense of confidence and surety that you want for them to have. So I think there's some challenges with that.
Yeah, I agree with that. In my experience, I think it, comes down to a point Carr was making around what's controllable, what's in that roles purvey to actually influence. And you could think about from a customer-centric culture standpoint, having broad, 5%, 10% of comp, we're all in it for customer sentiment type of thing. But those things tend to break down when they're a small component and they don't really influence it individually.
Sure.
So I see less. I also see less good comp plans than not. I still don't see a lot of the hunting roles or the quote sales roles having that form of sort of customer experience tied to it. In large part because of their roles purvey, which metrics they're comped on, how they're comped, what they're motivated by. Obviously, for customer success, it makes a lot of sense, right? So it's inherently part of the role, and the comp much more. Your other question, if I understood it right, around customer success, I fully agree that having them part of account planning and management and being customer centric and how you approach the overall account is very important. Often that's another area of silos where you see sales unaware of the value that we're delivering, and they may be helping cross-sell or whatever else, or you may have product specialists or someone else that's looking to expand in a given customer and is not really aware of how customer success is recording and experiencing and measuring the value the existing customer base or user base is getting out of it, right? So you bring those two together and already what you're proving of value in the account as you're looking to expand relationships, expand share wall. That makes perfect sense, but it's often not done.
Sure. This is a really fascinating discussion, especially as we're sort of moving into compensation planning season, right? And I'm fascinated by both of your statements that you see more bad comp plans than good ones, and I would absolutely agree with that. I think there's a huge fear in changing a compensation plan. There's a lot of history involved. There's a lot of emotion involved. And that same thing applies to customer success. I do see the role of customer success evolving and becoming more and more important, especially as more and more organizations get a higher percentage of their revenue from existing customers. And this has been a bit of a raging debate internally at Forrester. Should customer success be its own organization? Should it report to sales, potentially to marketing, to the chief operations officer? I don't think we've quite cracked that code yet, but Sean, you made a great point. They do need to be involved in account planning, opportunity management, having that feedback loop into the rest of the organization of what do clients value, what are they hearing from clients and customers. On the compensation piece, I'm a proponent of everyone in the organization having some sort of bonus structure tied to the success of the organization. If they can understand how those dots connect, right? If they can understand how what they do helps drive the performance of the organization. I don't think you can tell someone, hey, you're responsible for every closed deal. And they're like, but I'm at the tail end of that. I have nothing to do with closing a deal, right? So I think compensation as a whole obviously is a very emotional topic, but I do think it's going to change over time, and the organization will be rewarded, including sellers, not just for closing any deal on the last day of the quarter with any customer at any price, to how are you bringing in customers who are going to have high lifetime value, who will stay with us over the long term, who will have high retention rates, high growth rates, high customer satisfaction, right? So it comes back to that first question you asked, Josh, of do we understand what our customers value? Are we doing what it takes to attract and onboard those customers and then keep them? And that's what compensation should reward, anybody who's contributing to that motion.
Yeah, I don't want this to be an ABS customer-centric discussion that breaks out into a customer success discussion, but I do want to kind of follow up with a customer success comment. I do feel like it's one of the most underinvested parts of most organizations. And I think that's because new logos are very easy to determine their contribution to the revenue of the company. It's really difficult, I think, for a lot of people to determine how relevant customer success is, how relevant retention is.
But
that
it's seen as a cost center, not as a
Sure.
not as a revenue center. It's
Eh,
totally the way that it's measured is wrong.
Exactly. So that kind of came to light when we were just having this conversation. I thought, it's underinvested because it's underappreciated, I think, almost too. And I think if we realized, I mean, that retention piece is a huge piece of our business, and we shouldn't ever take it for granted that customers are going to keep coming back. Because there aren't very many businesses where customers are just going to keep coming back. And I don't think that building a better product is the only way to keep customers happy. And I don't think selling new customers is the only way to grow a business. I think retaining customers, growing current customers, and that overall experience is ultra important. And I think you're right. It is seen as a cost center. I guess I'm curious, have you guys seen it done really well? And kind of what was the kind of thing that made that organization understand that customer success was an area where we need to have our kind of, some of our best and brightest individuals in the organization in that department, investing alongside them and, really contributing to that overall growth of the business? Have you guys, I personally, in my experience, haven't seen it done well enough across my, my career. But I'm sure there are examples of where it have, and I guess it'd be good for the audience to kind of hear what that might look like, what great looks like.
I mean,
I'm hoping one of my colleagues is going to jump in and give us a great example.
Same. I've seen much more similar with comp. Less
Sure.
than great. I think it's very much on a journey, and in the scheme of the modern economy, it is still largely underappreciated, underinvested in cost center. So I don't think I've seen great. I've seen where it's elevated more than others on a relative
Sure.
basis. If the strategy and the business objectives hone in very explicitly on retention and or growth of the base, right? Cross sell, upsell. If they really, as an executive team, are honing in on that, I see this in like PE-backed software companies, for example, that then they start putting more focus and talent leading that organization. I still don't think they've got it right in terms of comp and how to measure, right? But at least steps in the direction of how valuable it can be when it's done well. The other point that I thought of when you were raising the question, Josh, was, how do we even measure value for the customer? And I do think it's very important to get beyond the product. That's kind of step one in companies, and many companies need to get there of, okay, how do we measure who's using it, what their value they're getting out of it, kind of thing. But the customer experience, even more broadly, in the relationship with your company, your provider company, is also important, right? Which encompasses a lot more than just the product, right? It's follow-up with service, it's communication, it's ideation of how, right? There's a lot more there that's harder to quantify, but ultimately really does drive the stickiness, the retention, the growth of that platform.
I couldn't agree more. I think, Carter, I think we know how you felt about it. You made it very clear in your statement, but I think I completely agree with you. It'll be interesting to see as that position, that area of our business evolves. If we understand that kind of gross retention piece of the business and overall customer involvement and their voice and how important it is to the business. And I think that, to me, customer success is really what drives that. And I think it's becoming more and more the case, but it'd be interesting to watch. We look at how technology plays a role in all this. I think that's kind of where I want to go. And we talked about culture. We talked about compensation, which is kind of part of driving the culture. Let's just kind of peel off into technology a little bit. I think the question really is, how can the right tools and I guess technologies allow us to be more effective? I think when we look at ABS activities in general, so account-based selling, which can be, strategic CAM, it could be, it could be named accounts within an enterprise organization. But how have you guys seen, and how important do you think the right tools and technologies are to driving that performance and that success?
I would say vitally important and becoming more important. And I think, Carter, you said something earlier about if every functional organization, marketing, sales, customer success, has their sort of own technology and their own data, and it all lives in silos, you're never going to get to that to a truly customer obsessed or customer centric organization. So, you've got to have a sort of, or at least be trying to get to a single view of the customer, a single source of truth. When it comes to things like account planning, we know that doing it in Excel and doing it in PowerPoint is not conducive to the collaboration and the communication and the embedding that in the customer or in your organization that you're trying to achieve. So technology there is critically important, but and then you think about the way technology, sales, marketing technology has changed over the last 5 years and become moved from capturing information from the sales rep into providing information to the sales rep and, about their prospects, about their customers, about their contacts, about their relationships. And it's really been a fundamental change in how we think about the value that technology can bring to a revenue organization, right? So
I love
long
the way
answer, but I think it's incredibly important as a foundational element of building this customer centricity.
I love the way you said it's evolved from capturing information to providing information to. That's a great, very simple way to look at kind of the evolution of these products and these technologies.
I think without the technology, you consume a lot of resource and man hours trying to force it to happen in a way that technology automates and doesn't do it for you, but it makes it a lot less investment of time and resource. I can't tell you the number of hours that we've had, in the company I'm at right now, just trying to build PowerPoint decks with some regularity to make sure that we are pulling marketing and product and delivery and all these people into what's going on with a particular client. And we have Slack channels dedicated to each client where we have things that we post call reports in different places, and all that stuff is sort of out there, but it still has to be sort of harvested and synthesized into how do you answer specific questions that come up about the client. And automation, the right toolkit really helps you to do that in a much less fragmented and disjointed way. It certainly does.
I love some of the words that you guys were using there around harvesting and synthesizing and the two-way that Steve brought up. I've been thinking about kind of where we're at from first generation CRM, right? This is the promise of CRM, and Salesforce, God bless them, is a wonderful organization and a great Salesforce themselves, and everybody's on the technology, but the value of CRM is so dramatically underappreciated because it has been so one way, right? So I think going forward now, we have to have that two-way, and it has to be the tech stack has to be organized around the user, the UI, the UX, user interface and workflows of the humans, of the reps. They have to get that two-way interchange. They have to get the value out of it in a way that's well beyond what we've been in the past. And I think that's going to be the difference maker this time around is truly, okay, this is at the point of interaction, not the menial task, not the one way, but really being able to take value out of it in their workflow with their customers.
Yep, I think that's great. I think when you look at the idea of putting the power in the hands of the user, and I think that cross-functional collaboration piece is huge. I think I can remember being resistant at one point in my career to the kind of CRM idea because it just felt like I was entering information to something that I was gaining no value from. And I think originally that was kind of the case, to be honest with you.
True.
Yeah, it was kind of true.
Yeah.
And it was a way to kind of protect your customers as salespeople moved in and out of the organization. But it really wasn't used in a way to provide a better experience for the customer. I think as that's evolved and changed, I think we've really seen, the impact of that. I think as customers, we've seen the impact of that. When you look at that from a customer experience standpoint, in your view, how do we leverage that technology even better so that we can provide a better customer experience? So it's clear that if we collaborate more, we can close more deals, right? We can actually drive revenue through these tools. But then on the other side of that, how do we leverage those same tools to provide a better experience for our customers?
Again, I'll start. I think we can take a lot of lessons from some of the high-performing consumer organizations out there, the ones we actually like dealing with, not the ones that we have to deal with. They're very responsive. They're very personalized. If you do call them, they don't ask you, enter your social security number, and then or your account number, and then when you get a customer service rep on the phone, they say, well, who are you and why are you calling? It's like, didn't you already get that information from me? Shouldn't that be right in front of you? Yeah. So I think buyers and customers expect highly responsive organizations, very personalized interactions. They want providers to know who they are, what they previously bought, their role in the organization, and and coming back to something Carter said, they don't care whether that response comes from a sales rep, a marketing person, a customer success rep. They don't care about your internal organizational challenges. They just want the answer, and they want it when they want it, and they want it in a format that they want it. So I'm a firm believer that a lot of the experiences we have as consumers are rapidly making their way into the business world, and technology will enable organizations to meet the demands of their buyers and customers if it's done right.
Sure. Yep. I couldn't agree more.
I totally agree. And one of the things I've been sort of thinking about is whenever you launch new tech or you bring something else into your tool stack, I think there's an inherent nature from a salesperson to go like, how is this going to be used against me? So instead of thinking about how is this tool going to empower me, how is this going to make me more successful? It's like, how much of my day is this going to take? And then, if I start recording all my calls, am I going to get all this criticism for the things that I misspoke or stuttered on or whatever? And I think as leaders, I think we have to be very careful about how we use the insights and things that we get out of our tools in order to sort of really bring those advantages back to the team. So I really try, I'll get reporting that'll say, here's some coaching tips for some of these people. Sometimes I don't use that because I don't want people to associate their use of the CRM with the negative. I don't want people to be thinking that they need to withhold some of the stuff and put it in late, or I'll log it later, or I'll wait to see how this pans out before I put it in. I want them to feel really engaged with it in real time so that we're seeing all of that. And I think that how we as leaders behave with that information and how we use that constructively to really coach and develop the team is really important.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's the point I keep coming back to, is that sort of change management wraparound, keeping it focused and simple, because there's a lot of good options out there. Picking one that's good enough and having enough of a tight wraparound on it that we're talking about it, back to the whole exec engagement. We're going to reference it when we're talking about the customer, talking through you, we're going to act on it. A clear value story for the wraparound. Here's a couple of things that you're going to get value. You're going to be able to, make more money. You're going to deliver more value for your customer using this information. We're going to test it, right? Pick a couple of use cases and test it. I think that way of just breaking down the reason and the behavior change are really important, versus the opposite of just throwing a tech stack at sales reps who don't want to be analysts. They don't want to be tracked. They don't want to all the other sides of how it's felt experience wise from the rep side to go through the first generation of CRM.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. I think getting that feedback from the customer, how their experience is different as a result of our use of this technology, I think would be helpful too. I think salespeople would generally be probably more comfortable using the technology if they saw that it had a direct result on the kind of experience from the customer too. So I think being able to feed that back in the organization is key. When you look at the DemandFarm tool and tools like ours, there's an account planning function that's there. There's also, I think, an opportunity management function that we don't really talk about enough, I think, as an industry, where there's a lot of value, I think, in these tools. But in the account planning function, I think where we miss a lot is we don't actually co-create with our customers enough. I think we actually create account plans as a team in our organization. The best practice that you'll see people using is where they do it across their own organization. A lot of times you see somebody does it in isolation by themselves. But when you really see people reaching out and co-creating with customers, I think that's kind of the pinnacle of this customer experience, where they're actually along for the journey of creating that plan and what you're going to do together over the next couple of years and how you're going to make them more successful and understand their pain. I think we could use that technology a lot better, I think, across all industries. I think the CRMs have kind of set the tone, and then it's up for all of the rest of us in that ecosystem, I think, to kind of start where they stop and continue to make that journey even better.
Yeah, Josh, you hit on the three things I had written down of what can the account plan, the tool actually deliver on that, right? So one, it's relevant stuff we're actually talking about, they care about. I think Steve hit on that well. It's non-repeated. You're not wasting my time, and it's adaptable. You're able to use it in a way, exactly what you said, to add new value for me to think through things. You're not just pushing the same one idea, but you're adapting as we go and as we converse to figure this thing out on my behalf.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the way you phrased that, Sean. I might add one, and maybe this was embedded in there, but which is uncovering sort of unknown insights about your customers that you can then go out and confirm with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's the hidden buyer, whether it's value that maybe you weren't thinking about that you could deliver to them, whether it's aligning with their goals and initiatives. So this idea of bringing the customer in and making them part of your account planning and execution process is just vitally important.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Excellent.
You
I
can
think
do it. There may be some who are like, that's not the kind of relationship I want with you. So, and maybe that's okay. But
I mean, I can think of a couple of organizations that everybody would recognize that are just not great strategic accounts. They don't really have a desire. They're not built in a way. Sean and I've had this conversation in the past, actually. Some companies just aren't organized in a way where they can receive the benefit of that strategic relationship and that strategic partnership. And they're organized in a way that's almost in conflict with that. And I think if you continue to try to pound up against that, it's a lot of energy, a lot of resource, and you're not really adding any value to the customer, and you're not getting anything in return. So I think that's also an important part of this is there are going to be some customers that just aren't really structured that way. It's unfortunate because it's to their detriment, I think, in most cases. But there are some companies that's just kind of how they're organized. That's a good point.
And I think it's fair to sit there and say we're not the hammer for every nail. And so when we go out as a salesperson, it's really great. We tend to want to make it work. We want to figure out how to close this deal. And I'm going like, not every deal should be closed. We should be able to go, we're not the best solution for what you're trying to do. The problems that you have and that you're trying to solve, you're never going to be fully excited about the way that we solve that. And, you should go do this or go do something else. Because ultimately you're buying, you're getting the short-term benefit of this, sale or whatever, but you're buying yourself a load of problems down the line with unsatisfied, unmet expectations and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know, I think that there's part of that is like, do you really understand what you do for your customers and how you link into what they need? And are you the right solution for it? Or can you?
I love that as a sales leader, you have that approach. I think as a sales leader, embedding that into your sales culture is super impactful. Letting your people know that it's okay. Sometimes we're not the right fit, and selling something that the customer doesn't need doesn't benefit anybody long term.
Let's get to that faster. Don't let's not spend a year trying to figure that out. Let's get to that sooner.
So it ties back into our compensation discussion, right? Because it's really hard for a sales rep to walk away from a deal that they've put any time on, and yes, maybe it's a glimmer of hope in the future, but boy, that's a tough one to walk away from when their compensation plan is telling them to do exactly the opposite and close any deal. Right.
Yeah, I had a very similar thought, but versus the comp side, I was thinking about the management reinforcement. So if your manager and executive are sort of celebrating those walkaways and showing to the rest of the org that we did this for the right reason, it's okay to do this, that goes a long way versus, oh yeah, we talk about that, but at the end of the day, it's just closing deals.
Yep.
I don't have any data to back this up, but I can imagine the deals you walk away from, somebody from that deal ends up coming back at some point. They change organizations and you are a good fit. The amount of trust that you've built in that process, I think is exponential. So I don't have data.
Well, it also lets
give
that salesperson credibility to call that person for the rest of their career, no matter what company they go to.
Exactly.
100%.
They've built their personal brand and their personal credibility up by not selling the wrong solution. So there is a long-term play there that is valuable. It's just harder to see sometimes.
Have you guys ever seen a compensation strategy that would include? I can't even imagine what that would look like, compensating salespeople from walkaways. I mean, I love the idea. I think it's impactful. I've just never seen it.
Closest I've seen to that is where you compensate based on like first year and second year value. And the idea is that like if you're bringing in a customer that is going to flame out after they do like one or two engagements and they're not going to be long-term value, that's going to have it's not going to give you a positive payment.
That's a great example
on that.
I like that.
But even it's harder to do because it's sort of a long-term thing. You've got to track it in a certain way, and it gets to that, are you double counting, double paying multiple people for things? And you've got certain obstacles to overcome.
Excellent. Well, that was it for me, guys. I really appreciate. I had fun. I could do this all day. It's a fun conversation. If you guys have anything else to add to kind of tie things up, or is there anything that you guys have that's kind of hot and burning that you wanted to contribute before we end this discussion?
I think so for me. I appreciate the discussion.
Enjoyed the discussion. I would bring it back to, if you're going to be customer centric or customer obsessed, that means you really have to understand your customers and what they want, what they value, how they measure that value. And I mean, that to me is the whole purpose of account-based selling and account planning and strategic account planning is to take that deep dive into those customers and coordinate across the organization and how you're going to acquire and then deliver that value.
Mm-hmm.
I would add on and sort of build on Steve's point here and say, voice of customer plus organizational accountability to act.
Mm-hmm.
So the tools and systems that make sure and keep people individually responsible for acting on, and systematically, this is back to building the organizational culture, customer centric, right? If you don't have that action based on what the customer is telling you, then it all falls flat.
I think it's an interesting time of year, considering it's where we're all a lot of us anyway, are going into our planning cycles for next year. And we are doing these account-based plans. And when we think about the goals that you have for these, some of these goals, we should really be focused on, are these goals connected to and empowering high-value unmet needs of the customer? Or are they our aspirations? Do they serve our needs? I mean, we may want to grow an account by 25%. Is that because that's good for the client and that solves a need for them? Or is that just because we want to get 25% more revenue out of them? And I think being able to link those things together and go, I'm all about growing by 25%, but it needs to be because we're going to be working with 3 additional teams that we're going to add value to, and we're going to solve problems for, and we're going to do more and more and more with them, as opposed to it just being this goal in a vacuum. So I think as we go into this planning cycle, making sure that your goals for these accounts are linked back to client needs, and that if you're able to satisfy your goals, one of the outcomes that you would have is a delighted client, as opposed to just a client who's paying more.
Sure.
I give 2 thumbs up to that one. That's spot on.
Mm-hmm.
Well said.
I think Andy Williams said it best. It's the most wonderful time of the year, right? I think that's what he had in mind when he wrote when he sang the song. So anyway, guys, thanks for the time. I appreciate a good conversation, and hopefully it was impactful and interesting for other people too. So anyway, thanks a lot. Have a good rest of your day.